Let's get to Tim Walz, who, just when you think no one's sitting at this table, neither she nor the big white blanket, can embarrass themselves any further, he does. She asks him, to her credit, about the carrying the weapons in war, which we know is a lie. He never served in war. He's been stealing valor for quite some time. And take a listen to this answer.
Say, hey, when there's a problem, you call a man. The Democrats can't even tell you what a man is.
So when you hear Walz brag about how much of a man he is, what does that tell you?
I think there might be a little bit of a cope there, you could say. There's a little bit, he has to remind us how masculine he is, trying to not even be able to load a shotgun or fix a truck.
He sold himself as the everyman, the teacher turned leader who understood the soul of Minnesota. But behind that plaid shirt branding and rehearsed empathy was a man who governed with a press team, not principles. That illusion might have worked if Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk hadn't torched it on live broadcast. They didn't come to argue, they came to expose. What followed wasn't politics, it was an autopsy.
And the idea that you said that you were in war.
Yeah.
Did you misspeak, as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar is not always correct. But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my dog.
This is a sacred trust. In the spring of 2005, Walz walked away from that sacred trust, abandoning his post when he learned of an upcoming Iraq deployment. This is Senecal Pubula saying this. He is a coward. According to this Twitter feed, he is a quitter. And every veteran I've talked to thinks that Walz is close to betraying the country by doing it.
While most commentators politely tiptoe around failure, Kelly and Kirk lit it up like a bonfire. They didn't need permission to call out incompetence. They just needed the receipts. And Walz gave them plenty. From education collapse to economic stagnation, they dragged every lie into the light and made it beg for mercy. It wasn't even a debate. It was a dissection. Kelly took one look at Walz's relatable dad persona and smelled the spin a mile away. She's seen enough political theater to recognize a character in a costume, and that's all Walz brought to the stage. He campaigned on unity and governed on deflection. He promised transparency, but spent more time hiding behind podiums than facing reality. When the chaos hit, riots, learning loss, small businesses crushed under government mandates, Walz didn't lead. He disappeared, a ghost with a PR team. Kelly shredded the act with precision. She called out the cowardice, cloaked in compassion. A man who promised clarity, but governed with vague talking points and hollow gestures. Walz didn't solve problems. He organized press conferences to pretend they didn't exist. And when asked real questions, he gave answers that could have been written by a Hallmark intern. All sentiment, zero substance.
You said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about our children being shot in schools.
I'll tell you one thing. The most masculine thing that someone can do in America today is stand up for women that are not able to stand up for themselves.
Right.
So while Tim Walz is going on Gavin Newsom's podcast, attacking me, by the way, saying that I'm a bad guy, well, I'm sorry, Governor Walz. One thing that we don't have in common is, unlike you in Minnesota, I, every single day, am actually fighting for female privacy in locker rooms and that women's sports will not have men in them. Real men stand up for women when they're not able to stand up for themselves.
Kirk, on the other hand, didn't waste time with image. He went straight for the wallet, the economy. He torched Walz's fiscal record like it was written in gasoline. Businesses were fleeing Minnesota like it was on fire, and Kirk made damn sure people knew why. High taxes, heavy regulations, anti-business rhetoric dressed up as progress. Kirk laid it out clearly. Under Walz, the state punished success and rewarded dependency. And somehow we're supposed to call that equity? Kirk mocked the idea that prosperity means growing government payrolls while strangling the private sector. He described Walz's economic strategy as reverse alchemy, turning gold into potholes. Minnesota collected more tax money than ever, and yet everything that mattered, roads, hospitals, schools, crumbled. Where did it go? Certainly not to the people who needed it. Then the two of them peeled back the pandemic response, and it was brutal. Walz, they argued, didn't manage a crisis, he exploited it. Kelly pointed out how he played part-time epidemiologist and full-time fearmonger. Lockdowns came hard and fast, unless, of course, your cause aligned with his political narrative. Small businesses crushed. Big box stores thrived. Churches closed. Liquor open. It wasn't science, it was selective authoritarianism.
Disgusting, repulsive, and reprehensible examples of abandoning one's unit, of turning back on country and instead for own personal comfort and safety that we have ever seen in politics. And it's far worse than I even think people are describing it. It is worse than stolen valor. It is abandoning your fellow soldier.
As the illusion crumbled, they turned to education, the supposed crown jewel of Tim Walz's resume. He had been a teacher once, and that credential had been paraded around like a shield against criticism. But credentials don't equal competence, and under his watch, Minnesota's education system didn't just slide, it fell off a cliff. Megyn Kelly went in with surgical precision. The data wasn't vague, it was damning. Reading scores were in free fall. Math performance tanked. Graduation rates became a game of lowered standards instead of real achievement. And the governor? He pushed more virtual learning, more bureaucracy, and more excuses. No bold reform, no accountability, just committees, slogans, and a bizarre faith in Zoom classrooms as a long-term solution. Children were robbed of real learning, and Walz sent out tweets about resilience. Kelly made it brutally clear, this wasn't just a policy failure, it was a betrayal of the most vulnerable. Kids who couldn't afford private tutors, whose parents couldn't opt out of the system. These children became collateral damage in a leadership crisis disguised as pandemic management. And the worst part? Walz acted like this was a transition, not a collapse. He reframed failure as evolution, as if academic decline was simply part of a broader educational journey. Spin like that doesn't fix anything. It insults the intelligence of every parent watching their kid fall behind. Charlie Kirk didn't hold back either. He called Walz's school strategy a political petri dish, more interested in cultural indoctrination than academic excellence. Critical theory, gender politics, and social justice syllabi took center stage, while literacy rates disintegrated.
What kind of bullshit is that? No, you don't, sir. We don't lie about military service we didn't actually perform, like going to war. We don't steal valor by saying that we had a higher rank in the National Guard than we did. We don't run around saying we served in operating enduring freedom in Afghanistan when we didn't. We don't stand and watch somebody say that we were in combat in Iraq when we weren't.
Kirk asked the obvious, how do you claim to champion equity while presiding over historic learning gaps? Under Walz, education was less about learning and more about appeasing the loudest activist voices in the room. And when they pivoted to public safety, things got even more damning. Kelly dove into what she called the theater of crime under Walz, a bizarre performance where rising violence was treated as either exaggerated or justified, depending on the political context. Police morale shattered, officer resignations through the roof, community trust collapsing. And what did the governor do? He tried to thread the needle between law enforcement and radical activists, and in doing so satisfied neither. She laid it bare. Walz didn't defund the police directly. He did something worse. He let others do it, then stood by with a carefully worded statement once the damage was already in motion. He gave moral cover to chaos. He nodded at the narrative while pretending to stand above it. And in that vacuum, crime surged and communities suffered. Kirk jumped in with numbers, rising assaults, carjackings, thefts, all in cities where Walz's party had the power and the platform. The governor's silence wasn't just complicity, Kirk argued, it was cowardice. He claimed Walz didn't view law and order as a priority unless the cameras were rolling. Crime became background noise in a political script focused on optics, not outcomes. Then came the cultural fault lines. Kelly brought the hammer down hard. Walz, she argued, had mastered the art of pretending to be the adult in the room while enabling the worst forms of ideological extremism. He didn't stand for anything. He waffled, nodded, and parroted buzzwords while avoiding every hard decision on gender, race, immigration, free speech. Walz was a walking placeholder, never leading, just mirroring.
Tim Walz then lied about it to run for Congress and acted as if he was on the front lines. And people in Walz's battalion died. People under his supervision died. If Master Sergeant retired Walz could not be trusted to fulfill his duties he had to his soldiers, his unit, and his nation in 2005, how can he be trusted to be vice president in 2025?
Kelly called him out for weaponized moderation, the act of appearing reasonable while quietly greenlighting radical policy. He wasn't neutral. He was passive-aggressive politics personified. A man who wouldn't take a firm position until it was poll-tested, donor-approved, and socially padded enough to avoid backlash. And by then, it was usually too late. Kirk took it a step further. He said Walz wasn't leading Minnesota. He was executing a national Democratic script with a Midwestern accent. When DC told him to mask toddlers, he did it. When they said to close churches but keep abortion clinics open, he nodded like a bobblehead in a windstorm. He didn't think. He complied. That wasn't leadership, Kirk argued. That was political obedience, and Minnesota paid the price for it. Immigration was next, and again, Walz's position was all vague gestures and soft platitudes. Kelly mocked the sanctuary city pandering, the press conferences celebrating open-door policies, while real communities dealt with the strain, schools overloaded, social services buckled, and the governor, he offered hashtags and slogans, not real plans. It was all performative compassion, none of the gritty problem-solving that leadership demands. Always the one with numbers, laid out the cost, financially, logistically, socially. He connected the dots between unchecked immigration policies and working-class Minnesotans getting squeezed out of their own neighborhoods, schools, and hospitals. He wasn't blaming immigrants. He was blaming the politicians who made promises without preparing for consequences. Walz wasn't just naive, he was reckless.
Yourself from that clarification. And then here's two pieces of this that are really... I speak like they do. People are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves. And I speak especially passionately about, and then he goes on to blame it on the school shootings. I guess he was upset about school shootings, so he lied. But stop saying you speak like we do. I speak like regular people.
They turned their attention to Walz's environmental crusade, and it was another pile of contradictions. Kelly described it as a solar panel sermon, all shine, no infrastructure. Walz preached about green energy from podiums, while Minnesotans froze in the winter because of outdated grids and mismanaged energy policies. It was easy to talk wind power in front of cameras, much harder to keep the heat on when the system buckled. Kirk laughed at the absurdity. Minnesota had more money than ever from federal green subsidies, yet people were still stuck with crumbling roads and blackouts. Walz wanted to be the poster child for climate virtue while ignoring the realities of execution. Green dreams are nice, until they leave working families in the cold, literally. But they weren't done. Kelly went back to Walz's favorite weapon, the media. She exposed his press strategy for what it was: curated, sanitized, and manipulative. She pointed out how he only took questions from friendly outlets, ducked every hostile interview, and never spoke off script. He wasn't transparent. He was rehearsed. Every sentence sounded like it had passed through 6 consultants before it ever reached the mic. Kirk added that Walz treated media appearances like a school play. He showed up, read his lines, and expected applause. Meanwhile, the state was burning behind the curtain. And when real reporters asked real questions, the governor vanished. His version of leadership was a disappearing act, one where the only constant was the photo op. They weren't just making noise, they were revealing something chilling. Minnesota wasn't being led, it was being managed, like a brand, like a corporation, like an image. Walz wasn't a governor, he was the mascot of managed decline, smiling through every crisis, spinning every failure, and always avoiding the hard truth. By this point, Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk weren't just dissecting Walz's failures, they were mapping out a blueprint of how to destroy a state while pretending to govern it. The mask of moderation had been ripped off. What remained wasn't a steady hand or a thoughtful leader. It was a man playing dress-up in the governor's mansion, clutching to a script written by party consultants and legacy media editors. And when real challenges came knocking, he folded repeatedly. They dove deeper into Walz's pandemic theatrics. Kelly outlined in brutal detail how the governor had weaponized fear while pretending to offer protection. His messaging didn't empower people, it manipulated them. Every announcement was a panic press release. Every decision a show of strength based on bad models and cherry-picked data. Minnesota's pandemic response wasn't about science, it was about stagecraft.
What Walz did is the moral equivalent of a mother dropping off her 5 preteen children at an orphanage in the dead of night so that she could run for Congress. Yes, it is that bad. This was more than just abandoning troops. It also reflects a major personal deficit in his character and makeup. By the way, this is written by a veteran.
Kelly mocked how Walz rolled up his sleeve for cameras at every opportunity, acting like a wartime leader while hiding from every press question that wasn't spoon-fed. He wasn't leading, he was posing. And while small businesses were crushed, while children sat behind screens losing 2 years of development, if you like this video, then subscribe.